He supports the growth, the advancement of science of mind around the world. He's got a big job. He also works hard to get the Ernest Holmes writings in different languages. Reverend Mark is the author of 4 books that can be purchased through Amazon. If you Google him, go to Amazon, you'll find him there. He also has a website that is consciousbridge.com. So you can read more about his work there and get the links to his good work, his books. Pleasure to have Reverend Mark here. Let's give him a big NTNC welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Great to be back with you, sort of back with you, or back here for the first time, sort of thing. I used to come to Greeley and Fort Collins all the time. For those of you who've been around a while, you might remember me from those visits, but I think the last time I actually spoke to this community, you guys had merged and you were over in Greeley and you were about to move over here, et cetera. And that was right at the cusp of me taking a break from doing public talking. And I'll speak more about that in a few minutes. But it's great to be back into it, and I want to thank Scott for the introduction, and thank you for having me, and thank Reverend Barb for inviting me to be here today. I know we're doing a month-long series on revealing wholeness, and I asked her what she wanted me to speak about, and she said, well, talk about healing or whatever your heart calls you to talk about. And so I took that into meditation, and 2 things came up for me. I said, I do want to talk about healing, but I also want to talk about dogs. So maybe we can talk about both. So this morning I'm going to give you sort of a schizophrenic talk that bounces back and forth. First we'll talk about healing, all right? So what exactly do we mean by healing? I know when I use that word and we throw it out, probably the first thing that's conjured up in your awareness is a sense of physical problems. You know, that you got the flu and you're sick and you feel ill and you want to be healed. Or you broke your leg, or somebody has a threatening illness, or it's something that is a challenge to their physical body, and they want to heal that. That's how we normally think about healing. But I want to sort of shift a little bit and give you sort of what I see as a generic definition for healing. This is my definition, really. It's when we know there is a perfection that can be at play in something, and we sense and know that there is that perfection out there, and that in our lives we're experiencing something that's different from that. So that there's a gap between the two, a gap between our experience and what we know is truth. And it's that gap that we are calling ourselves to move through or across that bridge, that schism, to be healed. So the healing is really moving from the experience to what we know is our truth. And that can be in all aspects of our life. Now, I want to talk very quickly about how it shows up in our first person, second person, third person aspects of our life. That is, I start close to home, and that's the concept of physical healing. Anything that is challenging you this day. In fact, as I go through this, I would invite you to think about where is it in your life you feel the calling to be healed? What is it that you want to see or experience the healing, the closing of that gap? And from a first-person standpoint, there's actually a couple of areas that we can look at. One is that physical healing. One is the sense that maybe there is a physical limitation that you're having, a health challenge of some sort, and you want to move through that back to a state of total health. But sometimes it's not physical health. Sometimes it's mental or emotional health. In fact, this is a big topic in the United States right now, because of the challenges that we're faced with some of the mass shootings. So some of the causes are really point back to mental health, where we've seen some very famous people who seem to be successful in life commit suicide, and obviously suffering from some sort of mental concerns or issues. And so we know that around us, and we can see it in many of the people in our lives, there's this sense of a gap between what they know is the truth for their lives and what they're really experiencing. And they get to the depth of that gap is so great that they feel that they have to either strike out in violence or in their own existence here on this plane, simply to get out of the pain of that gap. But we all experience those in some degrees. I mean, we all have depressions or anger, or those moments when we feel like my experience is I want to be driving down the road and not have somebody cut me off, and then I get angry for a moment. So there's always these areas where we're called to heal a little bit in our own personal sphere of our lives. In the second person, that's in our interactions with people, the you of others. And so sometimes we see other people around us that we know are called for healing. We see gaps in their experiences that we would like for them and what they're currently having. Or it could be in our relationship with them. And oftentimes many of us, say, my significant other and the relationship we're having is not where I want it to be. I know there is a greater expression of how we can be in relationship to one another, but that's not what I'm having right now as an experience. Or it could be that you don't have a significant other and you're called to having that in your life. You're called to an expression of sharing this life and the gifts of this experience here with another critical person in your life, and you want that and you don't have it, and you're feeling that lack as a gap. And then we move on to the third area, or third person, and that's our interactions with the greater world. Now, this can be like our jobs, our careers, our finances, where we see that we're not in the job we want, that our bank account is not where we want it to be, that we're not experiencing the prosperity and abundance that we know is our gift here on this planet. Or it could be something that's even beyond you in the relationship with the world as we look out at the divisiveness in our political system, or the income inequality that we see so many people experiencing these days, or the aspect of how racism is raising its ugly head in today's society. And we look out at the world and we say it's a calling for a healing. We want a healing of the planet. We want a healing of our country. We want a healing of our political system. So when we're using the word or the concept of healing, we're really looking at those gaps between what we want and what we're experiencing and saying, how can we get to what we know is our perfection in all areas of our life? All right, let's talk about dogs. Now, I actually want to talk about 3 specific dogs that have been essential companions and healers to me in this lifetime. And I go all the way back to my youth, and I was growing up in the South, and we were living in a small town in the Delta of Mississippi. Everybody in my family hated living there. My father traveled around with his job. We moved frequently. But I loved it. And one of the experiences that I had while we were living in this town was that I was able to get a dog. Now, I'd had dogs previously, but they had never been my dog. This was my dog. And I had her, and I won't say she's one of the significant dogs, because I have had 3 significant dogs, but this one dog came into my life very briefly. Her name was Lady, and I loved her, and she was my companion, and we played a lot. But she only stayed in physical form for about 4 months. Got an illness and died very quickly. Now, what she did, though, was in that she opened me up to pain and grief. And here I was in middle school, had never had that experience of loving something so deeply that was now taken from me, that I now had the pain of the grief of that loss. And so, although I have just vague memories of this at this point in my life, I do recall that I was really grief-stricken. My parents, though, they like to have told the story for years that I cried for 3 or 4 days. And they finally said, we've got to do something about this. And so they took me to the pound, and we found this dog who was there at the pound. And she was copper-colored, and she was sort of a collie-cocker mix. And she had copper-colored hair, but black and white sort of woven in through it. But I named her Penny because of the color of her hair. And so Penny became my companion. And she helped heal me through the loss of Lady, the previous dog. But then shortly after we got Penny, we moved to another town, a larger town over in Alabama, Birmingham. And Birmingham's a fairly large city, and we were living in the suburbs, and moved in the middle of the year to a middle school, high school that was very big. A couple of thousand students went to here. And if you ever go to a big school, you know there's lots of cliques, and you come in the middle of the year, you're the outsider. And so my experience in moving in from this small town where I had a lot of friends was to a place where I had no friends. In fact, bullied. Not as bad as some other people. But I learned quickly on that if I kept my head down, stayed away, tried to be invisible, that I could, navigate through this experience. The only way that I really got through it was Penny. What Penny did for me was that I would come home, and my parents paid very little attention to me. Not a complaint so much, probably a good thing in the long run, but that's what it was. And my only companion really was Penny. And we would play and do things, or I would sit out on the front steps with her, and I can still remember vividly sitting out there with my arm around her, leaning up against me, and I telling her about my life and my complaints and things I probably would have shared with a friend if I'd had one. I was sharing with Penny. She was my friend. And so she was an essential healing aspect of my life and a commitment to me as I moved through my life, through that phase of my life. But of course, time goes on, and I did gather some friends and learn to drive. And one of the things Penny liked to do was when I was driving to school was to chase us. We lived in an area where there was trees and rolling hills and no fences. And so she would take shortcuts and chase me for a while, give up, and then go home. It was a routine we went through. Except this particular one day when Penny went a little further and a car was coming the other way and struck her. And of course, I panicked, and we stopped the car. And I went out and picked her up. She was still alive. We rushed her to the vet, and I can still remember the vet saying to me, "What do you want me to do?" His unstated statement was, "Do you want to put her down?" And of course, I'm telling him, "Do anything you can do to save this dog." So he looks at her, takes x-rays, casts. She ends up having 2 broken legs, opposite legs. And so it all gets splinted, and we bring her home. And she has to live for a couple of months in a baby pen, and I have to pick her up and take her out to go to the bathroom and so forth. But she eventually heals. But it was my love for her and my deep connection to her that allowed me to spend that time and ensure she was healed and taken through to experience. And we continued to play and be good friends for years. But of course, my life went on. And eventually I went to college, and I was dating, and I got married and had kids, and Penny became my parents' dog. She stayed with them. And years later, I was saddened to get the word that she had died, chasing another car, coincidentally. And I was saddened at that point, but I was at a new phase in my life. And I was moving on into marriage and kids and raising a family. Okay, back to healing for a minute. We teach here at our New Thought centers, our Science of Mind centers, the Centers for Spiritual Living, all of our communities around the world, 400 plus, we teach a philosophy of oneness. It's based on the work of Ernest Holmes. So many people have taken classes here and explored Holmes, a good number of you. All right, Holmes was a mystic and philosopher in the 20th century who did a lot of writing, and he looked for the golden threads of various faiths and religions, which is why we are so open to all religions and faiths here, is because we're at the essence of who we are is the truth of all religions. And so we teach that. And Holmes wrote a lot about healing. Now, that makes a lot of sense because if you think about what kind of people first come to a church, it's usually people who are in that space of the gap in their lives and they're seeking some support. And then usually find that and then find community and stay on. Thank you. Some people get healed and leave. That's fine too. But it's usually in the process of healing that people are attracted to coming to centers such as this one at the very beginning. And so Holmes wrote a lot about healing. And I want to give you a couple of quotes and just sort of comment on them for a moment about what we teach and what we say about healing, all right, about that gap that I was describing a moment ago. Holmes wrote, "Healing includes the emancipation of the mind from every form of bondage through a new concept of God, which causes the heart to beat with joy and gladness." Repeat a couple of things there. The emancipation of the mind. In other words, our minds are bound. They're in bondage. How do you get out of the bondage? It's a new concept of God, which brings us joy and happiness. So healing is simply about bringing a new concept of God. It seems kind of not quite all I would say about healing. He goes on to write, "This healing power is a consciousness of the unity of all life and the spiritual nature of all being. Man's life is rooted in the universal and the eternal, which life is none other than the life of God. The healing process, insofar as it may be termed a process, is in becoming conscious of the eternal truth." So he's saying the healing process is really about becoming conscious of the fact that we are one with God and that God is all of us, and that there is this unity. That's all there is to the healing. So what we're identifying is all these various gaps. The aspect of healing that is all the same. Now, we teach lots of ways and so forth, but the essence of all of them begins with that sense of the unity of everything that is. He goes on to say here that treatment, which is what we call our form of affirmative prayer, treatment should incorporate a conscious recognition that health has always been ours, abundance has always been ours, happiness and peace have always been ours. They are ours now, and they are the very essence and truth of our being. All there is of evil, of whatever name or kind, is an inversion of eternal good. That which we say is bad is just a flip of the good that's already there. And if we can see the unity and flip our awareness in thinking about things, then we can turn our experience around. As Wayne Dyer famously says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so it's all about a shifting of our consciousness. One more quote from Ernie. Healing is not creating a perfect idea or a perfect body. It is revealing an idea which is already perfect. Healing is not a process. It's a revelation. Through the thought of the practitioner, that's all of us, we're all practicing, through the thought of the one practicing to the thought of the patient, which is frequently us, but it could be another person. There may be a process in healing, but not a process of healing, he writes. You ever took the practitioner class, they hammered that sentence on you. The process in healing is the mental work and time it takes for you to convince yourself of the perfectness of the patient or the person you're working with, and the length of time it takes you to realize that perfection. So all we're trying to do when we are healing is shifting our consciousness away from seeing our current experience to seeing that higher level, that truth that we know is possible, and knowing that's our birthright and the birthright of the people around us. And if we can make our consciousness shift to that sense of unity and oneness, then that's when healing will occur. All right, back to dogs. Are you okay being schizophrenic this morning with... Whoa, there go the notes. And not that I'm using them, but I thought I might. All right, so I went on. I got married. I had kids. I grew through life. And my kids had dogs, and they were essential to my life, but they were more their dogs than my dog. And after many, many years, as like many couples who marry early and have the business of raising a family, they find themselves in a space where the relationship can be healed, or maybe the healing is in being apart. And after many efforts, my first wife, after 30 years, she came to me one day and said, I know we're selling the house, I know we're buying this new house, but I don't want to be together anymore. And so it opened another period of the dark night of the soul for me. It opened up another area for me to heal my life. And so we sold our house, and I moved into a little duplex, and I went through this process of sadness because I'd had this nice house down in Rock Creek and was now living in this little duplex with 2 bedrooms. And I remember feeling just so sorry for myself, what my life had come to. And during all of this, my oldest daughter was traveling in Europe, and she had left her chocolate lab with me and my ex-wife to raise. And it came with me during this time. And she returned shortly, and I said, if you want to leave, Java was the dog's name, if you want to leave Java here, you can. She says, no, Dad, I want my dog back. So Java went with her, but about a month later, she knocks on the door, and she shows up with a chocolate lab puppy. Little bitty thing. And love at first sight. Love at first sight. And this dog, which I named Harmony, became the love of my life. She became the companion through this dark period of my life. And it was interesting because it was kind of funny. We went everywhere together. I have this Jeep that you see me coming and going in. And that was her vehicle as much as mine. She would jump in it. We would go everywhere together. She would sleep up next to me, stretched out long ways, in bed. She would go with me a lot of times when I went on dates. She was actually instrumental as I got back into dating other women to helping communicate to me non-verbally which relationships were right and which ones were wrong. In fact, I was hearing a lot of the wrong. And a lot of it wasn't how they treated and interacted with her, to be honest. Until I met Mary. Mary is my current wife. And Mary and Harmony had a bond like that, like immediately, as did I with Mary. And we had this, all of a sudden, it clicked. So I always say, and I could go into great detail on that, but Harmony brought me through the dating process and into the reestablishment of a new relationship and a new love and a new expression, such that now I've been remarried for 12 years. My ex-wife and my current wife and her husband and myself, we're all good friends, and we travel together, and our kids all do all these things together. That I feel really blessed that we've expanded the vision of what a relationship and family can be. And Harmony played such a critical role in the process of healing me through that and bringing me to the new relationship. And so that when we bought a house, we had to get a yard for Harmony. It became Harmony's yard. And she became our child and went everywhere on trips with us. But of course, time goes on and years go by. And that loving presence that taught you unconditional love in the form of a dog got older, more infirm. And at a certain point, I realized it was time to spend time with her. And so the actual conscious choice to come out and do talks like this, and a lot of other things that I took off of my plate, were conscious in order to spend time with her as she went through this period in her life. Now, an interesting side note was that in the midst of all of this, when I first married Mary, she went to a channeler, or a psychic or intuitive, what do you want to call. And one time we were there for a reading and questions and answers, and this individual channeled to me that Harmony and Penny were the same soul, which made a lot of sense. So, Harmony gets older, and I am doing everything I can to make comfort for her, ease her life, pick her up and down from the car, make accommodations in the house, ramps out the door, carpets so she can get up easier. But it finally becomes the time that you recognize intuitively it's time for her to leave that form. And so last May, she made her transition. Now she taught me about grief at the biggest level. And I can only say that I cried for a month or more, that I would have these waves come over me that were like I couldn't breathe. And I would have to just get up and pace and be with myself and cry and moan. The neighbors all do it because I would be roaming the yard. They comforted me. But Harmony taught me about the limitations of the physical form and the unity of life. She taught me about the thinness of the veil between us and the form, non-form. Harmony taught me at a great level about oneness. And she taught me about the power of grief, which I wrote about extensively. I stopped writing, to be clear. I didn't write on my blog site for a long time until I wrote a blog last September called The Power of Grief. And I would encourage you to go out and read more about what I'm talking about in this moment. The website that Scott mentioned, you can see me after the service. I'll give you a card with the web address on it. So I'm going through this grief. But in this, I learned a lot, which brings us back to healing. And although we can talk in intellectual terms about the fact that healing, trying to close that gap, really is about shifting our consciousness to knowing unity and oneness in everything. seeing the perfection, that's easier said than done. Sometimes this physical form is very hypnotic and takes over. But I was gleaning from some thoughts in reflecting on this. What were some suggestions that I could give you in terms of how to turn to that sense of oneness? And I'll give four quick ones. One is to acknowledge this gap and the pain that's coming in it. For me, it was very critical that I had to sit with the fact that I wanted that spirit that was Harmony to be with me, but she wasn't physically. And that pain was very painful, and I had to push into and lean into that pain to really move and experience it at the fullest level, which brings me to the second suggestion, is that when you're pushing into the pain, eventually you need to find the gift. Find the gift that this pain is giving you. So no matter what it is in your life that you're looking out, that you're experiencing the gap and feeling into the pain, you've got to look at and figure out, where is there a gift? And for me, it was the gift of all the years that Harmony had given me, how she had taught me unconditional love, how she was now giving me the lessons of the unity of life and the thinness of the veil and all the things I've just mentioned. She gave me so much more. So I started focusing on the goodness. The third suggestion I would make to you, if you're pushing through some sort of struggle that's calling yourself for healing, is to ask for and receive help. Whether that's going to your physician in a physical challenge, going to your minister or a practitioner here to help you see wholeness and truth when you can't see it. For me, with Harmony, it was reaching out to my support network and talking about the pain that I was in. It was me reaching out to Dr. Patty down at Mile High and talking with her, going to a grief counselor through Mile High, who helped me through a series of discussions. Voice my pain, voice the gifts, and help me see the truth. And what was that truth? And that's the fourth suggestion, is that ultimately, when you're moving through these challenges for healing, is you have to bring yourself back, as hard as it may seem, to recognizing and knowing the unity and the oneness and the perfection of life. And when you're in the midst of the pain, I know it's hard to do. But at some point, you've got to push through, and you will in time see that this served you and that we are all one and that it is all good. For me, that push continued. And one of the people that I and my wife reached out to was, we got divinely guided to this animal communicator. Now, whether you believe in any of this, I don't care. But we went to this individual who connected with and communicated from the spirit of Harmony to us and told us that she was fine and told us that she was nearby. And in this, told us that she would return to us. And said, and gave us, of course, I'm like, when, where, And the only information she gave was later in the fall, leaves would be falling. All right, so cool. I know to check again in the fall. Fall came, we asked for another reading from this person. Harmony's still enjoying hanging out in the non-form. And she, maybe next year. I'm like, no, you said when the leaves were falling. So anyway, in my mind, what it did is it got my anticipation up. And so in the midst of all of this, we had forged a relationship with a shelter down in Denver called Max Fund. It's a no-kill shelter, and a group I'd worked with wanted to give them a donation, and we went and checked them out, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I had this one morning, I got up and said, I've got to check out, okay, while Harmony's thinking about coming back, let's go see what dogs are out there. I got to have, some sort of love companion here. And I look at their website, and there's this old black lab. And I'm like, who's going to get this old black lab? I'm going to go down there and check this dog out. So my wife doesn't know, Mary doesn't know that I'm going down there to look at dogs. And I go down to the shelter, and I'm just going to look at the dog. But that dog has gone. Somebody has adopted it. we've got a book here with some other dogs. So I sit down with the book and I turn the page. There is a picture of a dog whose face looks exactly like Harmony, and her name is Penny. Can't make this stuff up. So I'm thinking, got to meet this dog. So I get her. She's a wild puppy, less than a year old. Went as a chocolate lab, at the shelter, kind of thing. They said, if you want to apply for her, you're the first person to see her. She just came available this morning. Okay, my wife doesn't know I'm here. So I put the application in. They said, it'll take a few days normally for all this to process. We had her in 24 hours. And she came home and acted like she knew the house. And she's brought so much love into the household. A trip back to the channeler after this, the confirmation was it's the same spirit. Again, back, that there's such a bond and connection that it had to return. And we now watch her as she evolves into not the same personality, because the personality I need and Mary needs now is not the personality Harmony had. And what she's called to express and form now is slightly different. And she's experiencing and expressing for us a zest for life that I think is the divine perfection of what we need to learn. So what is all of this about? All around us, we see gaps in our life. All around us, we are called to healing. All around us, there is perfection if we can see it. The perfection is there, but the call is for us to shift in our consciousness to see the truth. Penny, Harmony, Penny, they're not healing me. They are on some levels, but on other levels, I'm calling them into my experience through my consciousness. And they're also bringing about gifts and expressing, allowing me to express what I need to learn in my consciousness as well. And this is occurring in your lives as well. So what I invite you to ask yourselves this day, what is it that you're called to heal? Where is it in your life that the healing needs to come forth? Notice the gap, feel the pain, see the gifts, ask for help, but ultimately, in your awareness and in your consciousness, come back and see that everything is connected. We're all one. It's just one life. And it's our life right now. Let's pray. And as we move into the space in our awareness of the oneness of all of life, let us take into our little pocket of consciousness right here, our little area of the oneness that we call our own, that we allow ourselves to see it expand outward a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, so that our awareness and what we know as our quote-unquote mind is a flowing energy interconnected with all that is. And we recognize that the life out there that seems separate and apart from us is inside us, that it's one life. And that anything that we look at and experience, that there is a challenge in the experience of our life, be it with our life or out there, we know is simply a divine dance of the oneness of God. And in this day, anything that we see that is a gap in what we want to experience, that we release that gap and see and know and claim oneness. We claim the highest vision for our life. We know that love, prosperity, abundance, whatever it is coming to us in divine perfection in this moment. We know that the healing is complete and perfect, that it is within each and every one of us and our expressions of the one that the healing is occurring. So I know that as we go forth this day, we do so with a sense of lightness and peace and joy and love, that we look out upon every other expression of the one around us and bring our love, our peace, our harmony to all that is. I know this is so, and I am thankful for Penny, for Harmony, for Penny, for all of you, for the experience and gift of life itself, so that I and you and each and every one of us, as the expressions of the one, can dance in this joyous expression and live the highest life possible, the one we know is ours. Thank you, God. And so it is.